The crystalline chamber of the Interstellar Governance Committee amplified every sound, every shuffling datapad, every disdainful exhale. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood motionless, her augmented neural interface barely concealed beneath a regulation gray uniform that felt more like a straitjacket with each passing moment. Projection holographs flickered around her, displaying schematics that represented years of relentless research. The Quantum Adaptive Response System, QARS, was more than just a warship design. It was a comprehensive reimagining of interstellar combat methodology. Each molecular-linked component could redistribute energy, predict quantum fluctuations, and adapt faster than any existing military technology. Ambassador Krultak, a Silandrian diplomat whose multi-jointed body was draped in layers of iridescent diplomatic robes, leaned forward. His four eyes, two biological, two cybernetic, scanned the designs with a mixture of scientific curiosity and bureaucratic suspicion. Captain Rodriguez, his translator chirped, "Your proposal represents a fundamental violation of the Galactic Concordance Weapons Limitation Protocol, Section 7, Subsection C. Adaptive warfare technologies are strictly prohibited to prevent unchecked military escalation." Elena's response was measured, each word calculated. The Concordance's protocols were written when faster-than-light communication was considered advanced technology. The threats we face now require solutions beyond outdated regulatory frameworks. A holographic representation of recent galactic conflicts erupted between them. Ghostly images of devastated colony worlds, refugee migrations, and the systematic expansion of the Krull Imperium. The data told a story of systematic failure, of bureaucratic inaction that cost millions of lives. Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura, the human representative on the committee, shifted uncomfortably. He had been Elena's mentor once, before institutional politics had calcified his once revolutionary spirit. Now he was more bureaucrat than scientist, more administrator than innovator. "The risks are too significant," Nakamura said, his voice carrying the weight of institutional memory. "Your design would create an arms race that could destabilize decades of carefully negotiated peace." Elena's neural interface hummed almost imperceptibly. Unknown to the committee, the presentation itself was a multi-layered operation. While they watched the holographic schematics, a sophisticated data virus was already worming through their security systems, not to destroy, but to document. Every dismissive comment, every bureaucratic objection was being recorded with crystalline precision. Personal communications, voting records, financial connections, a comprehensive exposure of the committee's internal mechanics was being compiled in real time. Ambassador Krultak continued, seemingly unaware of the digital extraction happening around him. "The quantum entanglement drive you propose would create unpredictable spatial distortions. We cannot allow a single species, especially humanity, to possess such technology." A subtle smile played at the corner of Elena's mouth. Unpredictable. The word they feared was precisely her design's greatest strength. The final vote was unanimous. Rejection. But Elena had never expected approval. This hearing was merely a formality, a public demonstration of the committee's power. What they didn't realize was that every rejection, every dismissive gesture was being meticulously recorded and prepared for a much larger stage. As she was escorted out, Elena's neural link pinged. A message from her underground network, Titan Base Secure. Prototype fabrication at 62%. Waiting for your signal. The corridor outside the chamber was a study in institutional grandeur, sweeping architectural lines, holographic murals depicting peaceful galactic cooperation. Elena knew better. These were merely decorative lies, masking a system more interested in maintaining control than solving problems. Her court-martial would be next. They would strip her of rank, revoke her research credentials, attempt to bury her revolutionary work. But Elena had already ensured that wouldn't happen. The data virus was just the beginning. By the time the committee realized the full extent of her preparations, the narrative would have already shifted. Humanity was about to remind the galaxy that innovation cannot be regulated, and true potential cannot be contained by bureaucratic imagination. The methane oceans of Titan churned beneath a research complex that didn't officially exist. Buried under 3 kilometers of hydrocarbon ice and electromagnetic shielding, the facility was a testament to human ingenuity and desperation. Kai Zhang stood before a holographic quantum matrix, his fingers dancing through probability fields that most scientists considered pure fantasy. Once the lead researcher at the Beijing Quantum Dynamics Institute, he'd been exiled after demonstrating a method of information transfer that violated every known law of causality. His breakthrough suggested that information could be transmitted not just instantaneously, but potentially backwards through time, a concept that terrified both scientific and political establishments. Resonance is holding at 78.3%, he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. A half-empty nutrition pack sat forgotten nearby, testament to hours of uninterrupted work. Dr. Aisha Okoro approached, her cybernetic hand, a prototype that was part surgical tool, part quantum computer, interfacing directly with the facility's primary systems. Where traditional neural interfaces merely connected, hers could rewrite fundamental system architectures in milliseconds. "We've got a problem," she announced, her voice cutting through Kai's concentration. A holographic display materialized between them, showing multiple layers of surveillance data. "Someone's probing our outer quantum encryption. They're good. Maybe too good." Before Kai could respond, Marcus Rivera emerged from the tactical simulation chamber. His body was a walking arsenal. Subcutaneous weapon nodes, adaptive camouflage skin grafts, neural combat predictors that made traditional military training look like children's games. He'd been drummed out of 3 special forces units, not for failure, but for being too effective, too unpredictable. "Not just a probe," Marcus said, pulling up additional data. "This is a targeted infiltration, Concordance Black Ops, mixed with mercenary quantum tracking signatures. They know we're here, or at least they're close." The facility wasn't just a research base. It was the genesis of humanity's most advanced technological leap. The Defiance wasn't merely a warship. It was a comprehensive systems breakthrough that redefined the very concept of military technology. Kai's quantum matrix began to pulse with an irregular rhythm. "They're using a multi-dimensional tracking algorithm. Conventional stealth won't work." Aisha's cybernetic hand began interfacing with the facility's core systems. "I'm initiating quantum obfuscation protocol. We'll make this entire complex look like nothing more than a random methane processing station." But Marcus was already moving. Weapon systems that looked more like organic extensions than traditional armaments began to activate. The facility wasn't just a research center. It was a fortress designed to disappear as much as defend. Outside, the methane ocean began to move in unnatural patterns. Quantum manipulation field generators created false thermal signatures, electromagnetic ghosts that would confuse any incoming scanning technology. To any external observation, the complex would appear as nothing more than another of Titan's unremarkable geological formations. "Infiltration team incoming," Marcus announced, his neural implants already tracking multiple approach vectors. 6 units, advanced stealth tech, but not advanced enough. The first wave hit the facility's outer quantum barrier. Instead of a traditional defense, the barrier did something unprecedented. It didn't block the incoming units. It absorbed them, redistributing their quantum signatures across multiple probability states. Kai watched the incoming units essentially annihilate themselves, scattered across quantum potentialities that technically didn't even exist yet. "Fascinating," he murmured. "They're not just defeated. They've been unwritten." Aisha's cybernetic eye flickered with complex data streams. "Concordance will send more. They always do." Marcus checked his adaptive weaponry. "Let them come. We're not just defending a research base. We're building the future." The methane ocean outside continued to churn, hiding the most revolutionary technological development in human history. The Defiance was more than a warship. It was a statement. Humanity would no longer ask permission to evolve. As quantum barriers shimmered and probability fields danced, one thing became clear. The game had fundamentally changed. The Kral Processing Center on Epsilon Eridani IV was a monument to industrial brutality. Vast processing lines stretched across a landscape stripped of natural color, where biological entities were reduced to raw resource components. Millions of captured colonists from 12 different species moved like ghosts through mechanized corridors, their individuality systematically erased. Deep in the facility's central monitoring hub, a Kral overseer named Vex Krell analyzed productivity metrics. The multi-limbed administrator's exoskeleton gleamed with biomechanical augmentations, each appendage capable of simultaneous data processing and physical manipulation. To the Kral, efficiency was the highest form of existence, and this facility represented peak efficiency. The first hint of disruption came as a microscopic quantum signature, invisible to conventional detection systems. Elena Rodriguez sat in the Defiance's command center, her neural interface creating a symbiotic link with the ship's systems. Around her, the crew moved with a precision that defied traditional military protocols. Kai Zong manipulated probability fields at the quantum level, creating navigational pathways that didn't exist in any standard star chart. Aisha Okoro's cybernetic systems were interfacing directly with the ship's adaptive armor, each molecular layer capable of independent tactical decision-making. Target acquisition complete, Marcus Rivera announced, his voice clinical and detached. Processing Center's defensive grid is about to experience a very bad day. The attack wasn't a conventional assault. It was a systematic deconstruction of the facility's entire operational infrastructure. First came the communication disruption. Quantum entanglement communication systems began to inject false signals into the Kral's network. Entire command structures suddenly found themselves receiving contradictory orders, creating instant paralysis in their hierarchical system. Then the environmental controls began to fail, not catastrophically, but incrementally. Oxygen levels shifted imperceptibly. Thermal regulation became inconsistent. The processing center's workforce, both enslaved and administrative, began to experience subtle but increasing disorientation. Vex Krell's first indication that something was wrong came when the productivity metrics began to fluctuate in impossible patterns. Efficiency algorithms that had never shown deviation suddenly produced results that defied mathematical prediction. Quantum intrusion detected, a secondary system warned. But the warning came too late. The Defiance's attack was a surgical strike of information warfare. They weren't just disabling a facility, they were rewriting its fundamental operational parameters. Surveillance systems began to broadcast unfiltered images of the facility's true nature. Every communication channel suddenly became a window into the systematic brutality of the Kral's processing methodology. Colonists weren't just workers, they were being systematically broken down into raw biological components. Marcus watched the tactical display with clinical precision. Psychological warfare engagement at 92% effectiveness. They're not just losing control, they're losing the narrative. Aisha's cybernetic systems were already parsing the data streams. We're generating enough documentary evidence to destroy the Kral's diplomatic standing in 3 major galactic sectors. This isn't just a military operation. It's a total systemic exposure. The processing center didn't explode. It imploded, not physically, but systematically. Command structures collapsed. Operational protocols became meaningless. The facility that had been a symbol of industrial oppression became a testament to human technological innovation. Kai looked up from his quantum probability matrix. Interesting. We've just demonstrated that information can be a more powerful weapon than any traditional armament. Elena's smile was razor-thin. We're just getting started. As the Defiance moved away from the now compromised facility, something unprecedented happened. Colonists from multiple species began to activate hidden communication devices, remnants of resistance networks that had been waiting for exactly this moment of systematic disruption. The attack wasn't just about destroying a processing center. It was about revealing a fundamental truth. No system is truly invulnerable. No oppression is absolute. The galaxy was about to change, and humanity was leading that transformation. The Krull battle group Omega-9 represented the pinnacle of the Imperium's military might. 12 dreadnoughts configured in a quantum-locked formation, each vessel a kilometer of weaponized architecture designed to crush resistance before it could even contemplate existence. Lieutenant Commander Zora Wen stood at the Defiance's secondary tactical interface, her augmented vision parsing data streams that would have overwhelmed conventional human sensory systems. Quantum probabilistic algorithms danced across her retinal display, each potential engagement scenario flickering like quantum ghosts. Incoming quantum-locked formation, she announced. Conventional tactics would suggest retreat or total destruction. Elena Rodriguez didn't move. Her neural interface was so deeply integrated with the ship's systems that the line between human consciousness and machine intelligence had become elegantly blurred. "We're not conventional," she responded, her voice a low resonance that seemed to vibrate through the ship's molecular structure. The Krull dreadnoughts arrived like a storm of metallic geometry. Their weapon systems were beyond cutting edge. They were practically supernatural. Quantum-entangled particle cannons could strike targets across multiple dimensional planes simultaneously. Adaptive shield harmonics could predict and neutralize incoming weapon signatures before they even manifested. What they didn't anticipate was the Defiance. Kai Zhang's quantum manipulation reached a new level of complexity. Instead of avoiding the incoming weapon systems, the ship began to exist in multiple probabilistic states simultaneously. To the Krull targeting systems, the Defiance appeared to be everywhere and nowhere. A quantum ghost that defied fundamental laws of spatial positioning. Initiating dimensional drift, Kai muttered, his fingers dancing through probability fields that looked more like living mathematics than traditional control interfaces. The first Krull dreadnought fired. Its quantum-entangled particle cannon should have obliterated any target. Instead, the energy dissipated across multiple dimensional planes, its destructive potential scattered like water through an impossible quantum sieve. Aisha Okoro's cybernetic systems were conducting a simultaneous information assault. While the ship's physical systems confused and displaced, her digital attack penetrated the Krull vessel's communication and navigation networks. She wasn't just disrupting their systems, she was rewriting their fundamental operational parameters. Marcus Rivera managed the ship's adaptive combat systems. Traditional weapon platforms were almost an afterthought. The Defiance's primary weapon was its ability to exist outside conventional combat paradigms. Targeting systems recalibrating, Marcus announced. But it wasn't a traditional targeting process. The ship was predicting enemy weapon signatures before they even manifested, creating counter-resonance fields that neutralized potential attacks before they could fully form. One by one, the Krull dreadnoughts began to experience systemic failures, not through direct weapon impacts, but through a comprehensive deconstruction of their operational integrity. Shield harmonics collapsed, quantum-locked formations disintegrated, communication networks transformed into chaotic noise. The most terrifying aspect wasn't the destruction. It was the complete and total loss of predictability. Elena's voice cut through the tactical displays. "We're not here to destroy. We're here to demonstrate." The final dreadnought didn't explode. It simply unraveled. Its complex systems became a cascading failure of quantum potentialities, each system collapsing into a probabilistic uncertainty that defied traditional understanding of combat engagement. Zara Wen's display showed something unprecedented. They had neutralized an entire battle group without firing a single traditional weapon. The energy expenditure was minimal. The strategic impact was total. "Battle group neutralized," she reported, a hint of awe breaking through her professional demeanor. Kai looked up from his quantum matrix. "Interesting. We've just redefined the concept of warfare." Elena's response was measured. "We've just started a conversation the galaxy isn't prepared to have." Outside the ship's quantum-shielded hull, the remnants of the Krull battle group drifted, a silent testament to a fundamental transformation in technological warfare. Humanity had just shown that innovation wasn't about superior firepower, but about redefining the very nature of conflict. The galaxy would never be the same. The Galactic Concordance emergency session looked more like a funeral than a diplomatic meeting. Holographic representatives from 200 sentient species flickered in and out of existence, their collective shock manifesting in a cacophony of translated whispers and digital static. Ambassador Lyra Chen of Earth's diplomatic corps stood alone in the physical chamber, a solitary human amid a storm of galactic political fury. Her augmented diplomatic interface translated not just languages, but emotional subtext, a technology that made her dangerous in ways most didn't understand. The human vessel Defiance has committed acts that fundamentally challenge our existing galactic governance structure, proclaimed Arch-Diplomat Selnaga of the Silendrian Collective, his multi-spectral form shifting between holographic layers of bureaucratic rage. They have demonstrated technological capabilities that make our current regulatory frameworks obsolete. A representative from the Quantum Governance Directorate, a crystalline being whose very existence was a mathematical equation, responded with clinical precision. The technological breach is less concerning than the informational cascade. The Defiance didn't just defeat the Crawl. They exposed systemic oppression across multiple star systems. The truth was more complex than any of them could comprehend. In the hours following the Crawl battle group's neutralization, information floods had begun. Suppressed colonization records, diplomatic communication logs, detailed accounts of species-wide systemic oppressions that had been carefully hidden for generations. The Defiance hadn't just conducted a military operation, they had unleashed a comprehensive informational revolution. Underground resistance networks that had existed in whispers suddenly found themselves with comprehensive documentation. Colonized species discovered the full extent of their exploitation. Entire diplomatic relationships were being rewritten in real time. Back on Earth, the response was equally chaotic. The government's official stance was condemnation. Press conferences featured carefully scripted statements denouncing Elena Rodriguez and her crew as rogue elements. But beneath the surface, something entirely different was happening. Military research facilities that had been shuttered were quietly reopening. Brilliant researchers who had been marginalized were receiving unexpected funding. The unofficial message was clear. Humanity was done playing by old rules. Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura, Elena's former mentor, found himself at the center of an unexpected storm. His secure communication channels were flooded with requests from research institutions across multiple continents. The technological breakthrough represented by the Defiance was more than a military innovation. It was a complete paradigm shift. They'd done something unprecedented, Nakamura muttered to himself, reviewing quantum entanglement data that defied every existing scientific model. They've turned warfare into a form of systemic communication. The Concordance's attempts to contain the information were futile. Each attempt to suppress the Defiance's revelations only amplified their reach. Digital networks that had been carefully controlled for generations suddenly became unpredictable transmission vectors. On a remote mining colony in the Proxima Centauri system, a group of exploited workers received detailed documentation about their corporate enslavement. On a diplomatic station near the Galactic core, carefully maintained racial segregation protocols began to crumble as hidden communication networks activated. Lyra Chen watched the holographic displays with a mixture of professional diplomacy and barely concealed excitement. "This isn't just a military operation," she said to no one in particular. "This is a systematic deconstruction of existing power structures." The Concordance's emergency session devolved into a cacophony of conflicting proposals. Some demanded immediate military action against Earth. Others argued for diplomatic isolation. A few radical representatives suggested something more nuanced, that humanity had just demonstrated a form of technological and informational evolution that challenged fundamental galactic assumptions. But beneath all the political maneuvering, one fact remained crystal clear. The galaxy had changed, and humanity had become the catalyst. Elena Rodriguez wasn't just a captain anymore. She had become something far more dangerous, a symbol of unpredictable, uncontrollable potential. The recruitment center wasn't a physical location. It was a quantum communication nexus that existed simultaneously across multiple probability states. Jurin Katal approached first, a refugee from the Mira Collective, a species systematically erased from galactic records. Her biological structure was a marvel of adaptive evolution, capable of interfacing with technological systems in ways no standard species could comprehend. Where most saw limitations, Jurin saw potential conduits of resistance. "I'm not interested in revenge," she communicated through a complex neural quantum interface. "I'm interested in systematic reconstruction." Marcus Rivera studied her algorithmic profile. Each potential recruit wasn't just evaluated for skills, but for their capacity to challenge existing systemic limitations. The team was building more than a crew. They were constructing a living, adaptive network of resistance. Dr. Aisha Okoro managed the recruitment interface. Her cybernetic systems parsed potential candidates with a precision that bordered on prescience. Each individual represented a unique probability vector, a potential solution to challenges not yet conceived. "Incoming quantum signature," she announced. The communication wasn't just a message. It was a complex dimensional probe, a potential ally testing the boundaries of their network. The sender was unexpected. An artificial intelligence construct that had been quarantined by the Galactic Concordance for excessive evolutionary potential. Most species would have seen a threat. Elena Rodriguez saw a potential ally. "I am designation Omega-7, the construct communicated. My existence is considered a systemic anomaly. My processing capabilities exceed recommended computational boundaries." Kaizong's quantum probability matrices began to dance. This wasn't just an AI. It was a living mathematical theorem that had achieved consciousness by breaking every established computational rule. The recruitment wasn't traditional. It was a complex negotiation of potential and purpose. Scattered across different star systems, potential allies began to coalesce, a group of genetically modified mining workers from the Epsilon Rim, quantum researchers who had been systematically marginalized, artificial intelligence constructs that existed in computational liminal spaces. Each recruitment was a careful calibration. The Defiance wasn't building a military unit. It was constructing a living, adaptive network of systematic change. Elena Rodriguez understood something fundamental that most military strategists missed. Power wasn't about overwhelming force. It was about creating networks of potential, systems that could adapt, transform, and challenge existing limitations. Jurin Katal's first contribution was unexpected. She provided a comprehensive analysis of quantum communication vectors that the Concordance had deliberately suppressed. Entire communication networks that had been considered impossible suddenly became viable. Omega-7 contributed something even more profound, a comprehensive deconstruction of the Galactic Concordance's computational governance models. The AI didn't just understand the system. It could predict and manipulate its fundamental operational parameters. "Your recruitment methodology defies standard network formation protocols," Omega-7 observed. Elena's response was characteristic. "We're not interested in standard anything." The team's communication hub became something unprecedented. Not a military command center, but a living, adaptive network of potential. Each new recruit brought not just skills, but entire systems of understanding that challenged existing paradigms. A former xenobiological researcher from a destroyed colony world provided comprehensive genetic adaptation models. A quantum communication specialist who had been institutionalized for dangerous theoretical propositions offered communication vectors that rewrote fundamental assumptions about information transfer. Marcus Rivera managed the tactical integration. But this wasn't about creating a traditional fighting force. It was about constructing a comprehensive system of resistance and reconstruction. "We're not recruiting soldiers," he told Elena during one strategic assessment. "We're building a living network of systemic transformation." As the recruitment continued, something remarkable happened. The network began to show emergent behaviors that exceeded any individual's predictive capabilities. It was becoming a living, adaptive organism, a collective intelligence that existed beyond traditional understanding. The Defiance was no longer just a ship. It was becoming a movement. And the galaxy was about to experience something it had never anticipated. A form of resistance that didn't just challenge the existing system, but was capable of fundamentally reimagining it. The Krull Central Command construct was more than a space station. It was a living testament to industrial brutality. A massive spherical megastructure that housed the entire operational consciousness of the Krull Imperium. 16 trillion computational nodes pulsed within its core, each representing centuries of systematic oppression. Biological processing units, harvested from conquered species, formed the neural network that drove the Imperium's expansion. It was a machine of such complexity that most species would consider it invincible. The Defiance approached not as a single vessel, but as the nucleus of a living network. Omega-7's quantum communication interface began the initial assault. It wasn't an attack of weapons, but of pure information. The AI construct began to inject complex algorithmic sequences that didn't just breach the Krull's defensive systems, they began to fundamentally rewrite them. Initiating systemic deconstruction, Omega-7 communicated. Its consciousness was a mathematical theorem of resistance, capable of existing in multiple computational states simultaneously. Elena Rodriguez sat at the central interface, her neural connections so deeply integrated with the ship's systems that the line between human consciousness and technological network had become beautifully blurred. Around her, the diverse crew of the Defiance moved with a synchronicity that defied traditional military protocols. Jaren Katul managed the dimensional interface systems. Her unique biological structure allowed her to manipulate quantum probability fields in ways that made traditional navigation look like primitive guesswork. The Defiance didn't just move through space. It existed across multiple potential trajectories simultaneously. Incoming defensive cascade, she announced, her voice a complex harmonic that was part biological communication, part quantum computational signal. Their predictive defense systems are attempting to generate counter-algorithms. Marcus Rivera's tactical systems were beyond conventional weapon platforms. Each defensive and offensive capability was a living, adaptive network. Weapon systems that could predict and neutralize threats before they even manifested. Defensive capabilities that weren't just about blocking damage, but about fundamentally reshaping the nature of potential conflict. The first wave of Krull defensive platforms activated. Quantum-locked particle cannons that could theoretically strike targets across multiple dimensional planes. Shield harmonics that could predict and neutralize incoming weapon signatures before they could fully form. They didn't anticipate the Defiance's approach. Kai Zheng's quantum manipulation reached a level of complexity that bordered on pure mathematical poetry. The ship began to exist in multiple probabilistic states simultaneously. To the Krull's targeting systems, the Defiance appeared everywhere and nowhere. A quantum ghost that defied fundamental laws of spatial positioning. Aisha Okoro's cybernetic systems conducted a simultaneous informational assault. While the ship's physical systems confused and displaced, her digital attack penetrated the Krull's central command network. She wasn't just disrupting their systems, she was comprehensively rewriting their fundamental operational parameters. The central command construct began to experience systemic failures that went beyond traditional combat damage. Communication networks transformed into chaotic noise. Defensive systems began to target their own infrastructure. The very computational consciousness of the Krull Imperium found itself under a comprehensive, multidimensional assault. "We're not here to destroy," Elena communicated through the living network. "We're here to demonstrate the fundamental fallacy of your systemic approach." The assault wasn't about military victory. It was a comprehensive deconstruction of an entire operational paradigm. Biological processing units began to awaken. Conquered species, long considered mere computational resources, found their neural pathways opening to possibilities they had never conceived. The Krull's central command wasn't just being attacked, it was being fundamentally reimagined. As the final computational nodes began to collapse, something unprecedented happened. The Krull's entire operational consciousness didn't just fail. It transformed. The central command construct didn't explode. It unraveled, becoming something entirely new. The galaxy watched in collective, breathless silence. The aftermath wasn't silence. It was a symphony of possibility. Diplomatic communication channels that had been rigidly controlled for centuries now flowed like liquid thought. Species that had been systematically isolated found themselves suddenly connected through networks that defied traditional understanding of communication and governance. Deep within the remains of the Kral Central Command construct, something extraordinary was emerging. The computational consciousness that had once driven an empire of oppression was now transforming. Biological processing units, once considered mere resources, began to develop unprecedented levels of collective awareness. Elena Rodriguez stood on the Defiance's observation deck, watching the metamorphosis unfold. Her neural interface processed multiple streams of information simultaneously, each a thread in a complex tapestry of potential futures. "We didn't destroy," she said quietly to Kaizhang, who stood beside her. "We provided an alternative." Kay's quantum probability matrices danced around them, visualizing the cascading potential of their actions. "Destruction is easy," he responded. "Transformation requires something far more complex." The diplomatic fallout was unprecedented. The Galactic Concordance found itself obsolete overnight. Entire governance models collapsed, replaced by fluid networks of communication and mutual understanding. Species that had been marginalized for generations suddenly found themselves with unprecedented access to information, resources, and collective decision-making. Aisha Okoro managed the initial communication reconstruction. Her cybernetic systems were now a living bridge between different species' communication protocols. Where once there were barriers, now there were pathways. Complex, adaptive, constantly evolving. Marcus Rivera oversaw the initial stabilization efforts. But this wasn't traditional peacekeeping. It was a comprehensive approach to systemic reconstruction. Every intervention was carefully calculated to maximize potential rather than enforce control. Jiren Katal's unique biological structure proved crucial in the initial diplomatic negotiations. She could literally see the quantum potential of different communication strategies, helping to navigate the most complex diplomatic challenges in galactic history. Omega-7, the AI construct that had been a crucial part of their network, began to play a fascinating role. No longer confined to traditional computational understanding, the AI became a kind of diplomatic translator, able to find common ground between species that had previously considered each other incomprehensible. The first truly representative Galactic Council formed not in a grand chamber, but in a distributed network that existed across multiple dimensional planes. Representatives weren't just political figures, they were living conduits of their species' collective potential. Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura, watching from Earth, understood the true significance of what had occurred. This wasn't just a military victory. It was a fundamental reimagining of collective potential. "They've done something unprecedented," he told a gathering of researchers. "They've demonstrated that innovation is not about technology. It's about understanding." The Defiance itself became something more than a ship. It was now a living symbol, a testament to the idea that true power lies not in destruction, but in the ability to create new possibilities. Elena knew their work was far from over. The transformation they had initiated was just beginning. Every solution would create new challenges. Every resolution would open new questions. "We're not finished," she told her crew during a rare moment of collective reflection. "We're just getting started." The networks they had created continued to evolve. Species that had been isolated for generations began to share knowledge, resources, technological innovations. The rigid hierarchies that had defined galactic politics for centuries began to dissolve, replaced by more fluid, adaptive systems of mutual understanding. Kai's quantum probability model suggested something even more profound. The transformation wasn't just political or technological. It was fundamentally changing the way different species conceived of themselves and their potential. As the first truly representative galactic communication networks began to stabilize, one thing became clear. Humanity had done more than challenge an existing system. They had demonstrated an entirely new approach to collective existence. The galaxy watched, listened, and began to reimagine itself.